It was 6 in the morning on a quiet Saturday. I was standing in my driveway, still half asleep, holding a cup of coffee. Then, out of nowhere, 2 police cars pulled up with their lights flashing. My neighbor, Denise, was already on her porch, yelling into her phone like the world was ending. Yes, he's still there. Arrest him. He's been parking illegally for months and no one is doing anything. I just stood there, staring at her, then at my truck, which was parked perfectly fine in my own driveway. One of the officers looked tired, like this wasn't the first time he'd dealt with her. Here's the funny part. Denise had been sending complaints about me to the Air Force base where I work. She wanted me fired, but what she didn't know is that I'm not just anyone who works there. I'm the base commander, her boss's boss's boss. She thought she could ruin my life with one phone call. She had no idea she'd just called the cops on the man who signs her paycheck, but let me start at the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where you're listening from today. I've always been the kind of guy who likes quiet mornings. Coffee in hand, the sound of birds, maybe the hum of the neighbor's sprinklers. That's it. Simple peace. So when I bought this house, I thought I'd finally found my little corner of calm. A wide driveway, a small patch of grass, and enough space between houses to make good fences make good neighbors feel like a lifestyle. But peace doesn't last long when you live next to someone who thinks they're the sheriff of suburbia. Her name was Denise. Retired, mid-50s, clipboard practically glued to her hand, and an HOA badge that wasn't real, but might as well have been the crown jewels to her. The first time I met her, I was carrying a box into the house. She appeared out of nowhere, the way cats materialize when you open tuna. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said with a smile that looked like it hurt. Just a few things to note. No overnight parking on the street. Trash bins must be hidden by noon on pickup day, and, "Oh, that shade of blue on your front door might not be approved." It wasn't even blue. It was gray, but I laughed it off, figuring she was just overly invested in keeping the place tidy. I hadn't yet learned that Denise doesn't stop at tidy. A week later, I found a neatly folded piece of paper taped to my garage. It read, "This is a friendly reminder that your driveway washing activities are causing runoff to the street. This violates HOA water guidelines. Please refrain from further activity." Runoff? I'd sprayed off some dirt. With a garden hose. I actually stood there for a second, holding the note, trying to decide whether it was a prank. Then I looked across the street and saw her blinds move. Denise was watching. I waved. She didn't wave back. A few days later, I came home from work to find a white pickup truck parked outside my house. Big letters on the side, County Zoning Department. The inspector, a tired-looking guy with a sunburn and a clipboard, met me halfway up the driveway. "Got a complaint," he said, flipping a page. "Something about unapproved construction?" I blinked. "You mean my mailbox?" He looked at the box, a regular store-bought metal mailbox on a wooden post. "Yeah," he said, squinting at his sheet. "That's the one." He actually laughed. "Look, man, I get these all the time. HOA folks think they run the county. Just keep it how it is. You're fine." That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a campaign. That evening, I walked my dog around the block, trying to cool off. A neighbor, older guy, friendly face, stopped me near the corner. "You're the new one, huh?" he said, in Denise's zone. I raised an eyebrow. "Her zone?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, that's what we call it. She's driven out 2 families already. One couple had a bird bath she didn't like. The last guy left after she called animal control on his cat, said it was free-roaming wildlife." I didn't know whether to laugh or feel bad for him. He leaned in a little and said, "Word of advice, document everything. Don't let her twist it." I nodded, not realizing yet how much I'd need that advice. Over the next month, the notes kept coming. One for my trash cans being visible from the sidewalk. One for the angle of how I parked my truck. Apparently it disrupted the aesthetic, symmetry of the block. And my favorite, a warning about leaving my porch light on too. Late. Every letter ended the same way. "Please remember, we're all part of this community." She'd even signed them with a heart. It was like getting bullied by a Hallmark card. Then came the incident. I was grilling in the backyard one Friday evening when 2 police officers showed up at my door. They were polite but clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, we got a call about a noise complaint. Possibly a domestic disturbance?" I turned off the grill. "You're kidding." They weren't. Denise had called 911 because she heard raised voices. I was talking to my cousin on speakerphone about a football game. After a short chat, one of the officers sighed and said, "You're not the first person she's called about. Don't worry about it." But I was worried, not because I was guilty, but because this woman had no limit. That night, I sat in my living room thinking about how ridiculous it all was. I'd moved here to get away from city chaos, to have some peace, some space. Instead, I was living next to a one-woman surveillance state. My cousin joked that I should accidentally knock her mailbox over, but that wasn't my style. I didn't want revenge. I wanted proof, so I bought cameras. Discreet ones. A few facing the driveway, one by the front door, one on the side yard. The next morning, I put them up while Denise stood at her window, pretending to water a plant that had been dead since spring. 2 days later, I caught her on camera, standing in my driveway with a measuring tape. She was measuring how far my trash can was from the curb. I watched the footage 3 times, not even angry, just amazed. It was like watching a wildlife documentary on obsessive control. That was the moment it clicked for me. This wasn't about rules. It was about power. Denise didn't care about the community. She cared about being right, so I decided, fine, I'll play along. But this time I'll keep score too. From then on, I kept a folder, HOA records. Every note, every video clip, every incident went in there. When she left a new warning, I'd smile, wave, and take a photo of it for the record. When she called the cops again, I asked for a copy of the report. The funny thing is, the calmer I got, the angrier she became. She wanted a reaction, but I wasn't giving her one. I was patient. Because patience, when you know the truth, is its own kind of revenge. And as I looked out at my driveway that night, the same one she'd turned into a battlefield, I made myself a quiet promise. I wasn't going to move again. Not because I liked the house that much, but because I refused to let someone like Denise decide who belonged here. The war in the driveway had begun. But this time, I wasn't the one on the defensive. The thing about bullies like Denise is that they get louder when they start losing control. Once she realized I wasn't reacting anymore, no yelling, no arguing, just quiet smiles, she shifted tactics. At first, it was almost funny. Then it got ridiculous. One morning, I walked outside to find a new notice taped to my mailbox. Mandatory HOA Safety Compliance Inspection. Big red letters. Official-looking stamp, except our HOA didn't have a safety committee. I checked the bylaws just to be sure. Nope, nothing. So, Denise had created one, out of thin air. Later that week, she showed up with 2 of her friends, clipboards in hand, all wearing yellow vests that said Neighborhood Safety Patrol. I stood on my porch sipping coffee while they circled my yard like a SWAT team inspecting a crime scene. One of them took photos of my mailbox, again. Another pointed at my gutter and whispered something dramatic. Denise finally called out, "You'll be receiving a notice for non-compliance. Rust on your downspout. It's a safety hazard," I smiled. "You mean the tiny spot of rust that's been there since 2004? She didn't like that. Her mouth tightened, and she scribbled something down on her clipboard like she was writing a warrant. That was the moment I knew she was spiraling. By this point, I had a folder full of footage, videos of her trespassing, fake inspections, even her little entourage snooping around. But I didn't want to jump straight to legal threats. That's her game, intimidation and fear. I wanted something better. I wanted truth. And the truth, when you let it speak for itself, is louder than any clipboard, so I started talking to neighbors, quietly, respectfully. Turns out, almost everyone had a Denise story. One couple got fined for having a decorative flag that wasn't HOA approved. It was a welcome sign shaped like a sunflower. Another family was cited for excessive grass growth when they were on vacation. Even the retired vet down the street, sweet old man named George, got a letter about unsanctioned gardening. That was the word she used, unsanctioned. Like she ran a military base. The neighborhood had been silent because everyone thought they were alone. That's how Denise kept control, divide and intimidate. But once we started comparing notes, it was like watching people wake up from a bad dream. We started a group chat, shared photos of her notes, even recorded her rants at board meetings, and that's when I learned something really interesting. Denise wasn't even supposed to be the HOA president anymore. Her term had technically ended 6 months ago. She just never scheduled a new election. Classic power grab. So we decided to fix that. The bylaws said we could call a special meeting if 1/3 of the homeowners signed a petition. Within a week, we had 2/3. When we delivered it to her, politely, in person, her face turned the exact color of her red lipstick. "You people don't understand how complicated this is," she said, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. "Without leadership, the neighborhood will fall apart." I looked around at the group behind me, 12 homeowners, all calm, tired, and done with her nonsense. "Denise," I said softly, "I think we'll manage." She tried to spin it. Sent out emails calling it a hostile takeover, even claimed the HOA bank account had sensitive documents that couldn't be shared. But on the day of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Standing room only. Neighbors who hadn't shown up to anything in years were there, clutching their copies of her violation letters. Denise opened the meeting like she was hosting a press conference. She gave a long speech about upholding community standards and protecting property values. Then George, the veteran, raised his hand and quietly said, "Denise, you fined me $100 for planting tomatoes." The room went silent. Someone snorted. Then a few chuckles. She tried to talk over them, but the laughter grew. By the end of it, her voice cracked. And when the vote came, it wasn't even close. Unanimous. Denise was officially out. Of course, she didn't go quietly. A week later, I got a letter from her lawyer. It accused me of harassment, defamation, and property interference. There was even a demand for an apology and retraction. I read it twice, then smiled. Because here's what she didn't realize. I wasn't just a homeowner, I worked in compliance. For the county. Specifically, the department that oversees HOAs. I'd kept quiet about it because I didn't want to use my job as leverage. But now? She'd opened the door. So I drafted a calm, professional response, complete with a letterhead. "Dear Ms. Peterson, your recent actions and documentation have been reviewed. Please note that creating false safety committees, issuing fabricated violation notices, and impersonating an official entity fall under County Code 7.24, misuse of authority and fraudulent representation. Consider this your formal notification that a full audit will be initiated. No threats. No drama, just facts." She showed up at my door 2 days later. No clipboard this time. No entourage. Just her, pale, quiet, shaking slightly. "You work for the county?" she asked, voice trembling. I nodded. "I do." Her eyes darted away. You could have told me." I sipped my coffee. "Would it have changed anything?" Silence. For the first time since I met her, she didn't have a speech ready. No rule to quote, no bylaw to twist. Just a tired, small woman realizing she'd pushed too far. I didn't gloat. Didn't need to. Because karma doesn't need applause. A month later, the county audit began. Turns out Denise had been moving HOA funds into a maintenance reserve account that didn't exist. She'd paid herself for administrative hours. The total? Just under $9,000, not enough for jail time, but enough for serious fines and a permanent mark on her record. She tried to resign for personal reasons, but everyone knew. Her house went up for sale 3 months later. When the moving truck finally pulled away, the neighborhood felt lighter. People smiled again. Kids rode bikes without getting notes about sidewalk safety violations. Even the grass looked greener, though maybe that was just the peace. Returning. Sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens or courtrooms. Sometimes it's just the quiet sound of truth catching up to someone who thought they'd never be caught. I didn't celebrate. Didn't throw a party. I just sat on my porch one evening, same coffee mug in hand, watching the sunset over a driveway that was finally just a driveway, no notes, no threats, no friendly reminders, just peace. The kind that can't be fined or approved or voted on. And as I watched the last bit of light fade, I thought about all the people like Denise, the self-appointed rulers of quiet streets. They always think they're protecting something, but really, they're just trying to fill the silence with control. The thing is, silence doesn't need control. It needs respect. That's the real law of the neighborhood. And this time, the neighborhood finally remembered it.